plans to hold the line with Buck Sexton? Well, we're in it. We're in the fight, as we expected here. It's been 48 hours since Election Day. We're still trying to figure out who the next president's going to be. Now, most of us remember what happened in 2000 when the presidential election stretched on for weeks into January, but this feels quite a bit different, doesn't it? There appears to be growing evidence of what you could call voting irregularities. In fact, if you look online, you'll see people sharing what seems to be documentation, evidence, proving that there are dead people who somehow voted in Michigan, which I'm pretty sure is illegal. Or unless you really think there are 120-year-olds who are walking around voting in that state, I suppose that's possible. And that there are ballots that magically appear at just the right moment and happen to go 80, 90, even 100% for Joe Biden. I mean, didn't Saddam at least give 5% to the opposition in his elections? It's yet to be the case from what I've seen that there's a single instance of magically found ballots that all go for Trump. And we're supposed to believe this is all a coincidence, by the way. In fact, you're a conspiracy theorist if you bring it up. What we're told now by the Democrats is respect the system. Obey what the people in charge tell you to do. Don't question, don't undermine. This is about our sacred democracy. And yes, they're accusing us of being conspiracy theorists for pointing out what common sense dictates we would point out. They're saying there's no evidence for this, but the problem is we do have evidence. We can also deduce and analyze and look at trends and see a clear pattern. It's really the other side that is asking for conspiracies to be believed here, that this is all just happenstance. It's all circumstantial. This is just always going in one direction, kind of like those polls we saw. They were all skewed toward Joe Biden. Why would that be the case? Gee, I don't know. But now you're hearing these exhortations. You're having these appeals to good faith and decency for the sake of our democracy said to you all the time. That's what they're telling us. The Democrats I'm talking about. And to that I have to say, well, this is war, friends. And we are wartime conservatives. That's what the Democrats haven't recognized yet about the Trump movement. You see, for a long time we tried the other way. We tried to take the high road. I always appeal to the other side in the hopes that maybe they'll start reading Hayek and learn about the road to serfdom. Maybe they'll pick up some Milton Friedman or John Locke or a philosopher other than Karl Marx or the people that pop up on MSNBC. I've always hoped they'd open their minds a little bit. They'd see the error of their collectivist ways, the scorched earth tactics that they use in our politics. Friends, that was a fantasy. For many of us, the moment the clarity came was when we saw the effort to destroy Brett Kavanaugh. That was one of the most grotesquely horrific character assassination campaigns I've ever seen. The people that were involved in that effort, one of whom may in fact be our next vice president, were either completely immoral or just abject morons. There is no third option. They knew, or they should have known, that there was no evidence, no corroboration, and no sane reason to believe that Brett Kavanaugh was any of the things he was accused of during that confirmation battle. A serial gang rapist in high school? No one ever heard of this? And no evidence for it. Just crazy people making stuff up. We all saw it. The left didn't care. It didn't matter. They engaged in a ritualized torture session on live TV in front of tens of millions of Americans, all for the benefit of their own power. Can't give up control of the Supreme Court. Anything goes to stop it. And it didn't stop them one bit that they were ruining a good man, a husband, a father, a great legal jurist, somebody who should be elevated in a sane and just society. No, they tried to destroy him because he stood in the way of what they wanted. And then there's Trump. What is Trump's magic power? What is his X factor? How is he different than what we've seen before in the Republican Party? There are a lot of rules in politics. I'm not talking about the Constitution or laws. These are the unwritten rules, the code of conduct among politicians here. How you talk to the media, how you respond to your critics in the Democrat Party. Trump took one look at those rules and he said, no. He's not going to play the game by the rules that the left only makes for themselves and that they constantly change on a whim. He says, if you're going to slap me, I'm going to throw a punch. If you're going to try to ambush me, I'm going to come around on your flank and finish you off. That's the Trump approach to politics. And that's why he started a movement. Because, and don't ever forget this, it is the left that has broken norms. It is the left, the Democrat Party, that for 4 years has lied about the President of the United States being a traitor, being a Russian asset, a pawn of the Kremlin who stole a U.S. presidential election. For 4 years, they've been saying this. They used this as a club against Trump and all of his supporters. And they were serious. They weren't just saying this in newspapers, although that too. They got a special counsel investigation. They wanted prison sentences for Trump, for his advisors, for his family members, all based on a lie.
There is a non-trivial chance that if Donald Trump loses the election, he ends up living out the rest of his days in prison.
But here's the question. Would you like to see President Trump in prison?
Do you want to see the president in prison?
Do you think Trump could end up going to jail?
He could actually face jail time.
Donald Trump could end up in jail.
In prison.
If he ends up in jail, so be it.
Oh, but now the left wants us to believe the Democrat Party is lecturing us in good faith and about good faith. This is laughable, my friends. Look, I can't guarantee you that we will achieve victory in this battle ahead. I can't tell you what the outcome is going to be, but I do know that moral appeals from our political opponents who have completely absolved themselves of any morality or dignity in the way they conduct their politics when the stakes are really high should not influence your thinking in the least. Do you really believe it's an accident that right now the tech giants, the tech oligarchs, are limiting what you're allowed to see or throttling or shadow banning or whatever, just straight up blocking people like me from being able to reach you and share information with you? You think they hadn't thought about this beforehand? There was no plan here? Remember in 2016, Google and Facebook, these companies had to have adult cry sessions after Trump beat Hillary Clinton. Do you think they have a different mentality now? Of course not. In fact, when they return to the Bay Area or Brooklyn or wherever their social and online engineers and influencers and all the rest of them live, they were targets of scorn from those companies because they were asked, why didn't you do more? Why didn't you block the fake news? Why didn't you block Trump? How did you let the Russians buy those few ads on Facebook that must have thrown the election? You guys didn't do enough. It's your fault Trump won. You don't think that had an impact? You really think the CEOs of any of those companies are willing to stand up to the woke mob? That they're willing to stand up to the people in their midst who are absolutists and seek the destruction of anybody who does not share their every ideal and plan? Friends, we are in a battle for control of the presidency, but also for the future of this country, with a Democrat Party that has embraced an ideology of leftist totalitarianism. Look, they don't have the power yet to be fully tyrannical. I get it. But their ideology leads down a pathway to tyranny. That is the logical and inevitable terminus. And the incrementalism that they constantly show us now indicates that's exactly what they're trying to do. That's what they want to accomplish. One party rule, total control, no opposition, do what they say. Wear that mask. So when they turn around with a smile on their face and tell you, come on everybody, let's just let the networks call these races in these battleground states. Let's not spread disinformation about the outcome of this election. This is about our sacred democracy. The founding fathers are watching us and they would want the system to work. I look at them and I say, I thought the founding fathers were a bunch of old, dead white racists because that's what you told me. Now you're going to cite the founding fathers and some kind of emotional appeal to try and make me stand back and not question obvious fraud? That's right, friends. It's fraud that is occurring in this election. You really think that what we saw with Kavanaugh, what we saw with Hunter Biden and the suppression of that laptop right before the election, the scorched earth tactics, stop at nothing, what we saw in the lies about Trump saying that he doesn't respect the military, how many more examples of this do we need? You think that mentality has changed? How many times do they have to show you that they have come with brass knuckles and are coming for you before we decide as conservatives that maybe it's time for a palm strike to the nose? Metaphorically speaking, of course. Friends, they keep telling us who they are. It's time we start believing them. Again, I can't guarantee you there will be victory, but I can guarantee you that unless we adopt the posture of wartime conservatism, if we don't dig in and fight, we're going to lose this country. All right, there's another fight going on right now. It's very likely to end up in the courts. The Trump campaign is launching lawsuits in a number of states in response to potential irregularities in the voting. Up next, we'll talk to civil rights attorney and national co-chair of Lawyers for Trump, Harmeet Dillon. Stay right there. You heard it there, folks. Trump supporters chanting "Stop the count" outside of a polling site in Detroit, Michigan, where absentee ballots were being counted. One of the key states, by the way, that still remains uncalled in this election. The protests come after, get this, poll workers were seen boarding up the windows at the counting center. What the heck? In an effort to shield the crowds from seeing what was going on inside. That's not sketchy. But the Great Lakes state isn't the only area in the country being flagged for potential voter fraud. The Trump campaign is filing lawsuits against Michigan, Pennsylvania, Georgia, and Nevada, while rightfully speaking out against the ongoing ballot counting. So does the GOP have a case here? For the latest on these challenges, let's bring in a lawyer involved in that fight directly, Harmeet Dillon, civil rights attorney and Lawyers for Trump national co-chair. Harmeet, great to have you.
Thanks, Buck. Happy to be here today.
All right, tell us exactly what we are facing right now. It looks like this is going to be a drawn-out legal battle. What are the primary contentions that folks across the country should be aware of that the Trump campaign is making in these challenged states now with these lawsuits?
Sure. Well, one thing to understand to start with is that each state sets the rules of the election, how many days past the deadline, if any, ballots can be received. What are the terms and conditions of poll watchers being allowed access, although that is required everywhere, and things like that, hours of the voting and so forth. And so these challenges are different in each state. You mentioned Detroit. In Detroit, they are preventing an equal number of Republican poll watchers, or sometimes any at all, from being in there, while Democrats are allowed in, or so-called independent observers are allowed in, to witness the handling of the ballots. Now, why does this matter? Well, it matters in many cases when you're dealing with provisional ballots or you're dealing with ballots that are illegible or somehow damaged, because in those circumstances, a official poll worker takes that damaged or questionable ballot and transfers the information onto a fresh, unmarked ballot. That's supposed to be witnessed by both sides. And under Michigan law, it can only be signed off on if both sides witness it, and also there is a perfect match between the number of ballots that came in and the number of ballots that leave. And if there is not such a perfect match, then all of the ballots in the precinct may be disregarded. So that's what's at stake. There's a lot at stake there. And so in other states, there are other circumstances. In Chatham County, in Georgia, there was a witness who claimed and certified under penalty of perjury that 53 late ballots were mixed in with the regular ballots. We sued to stop those from being counted. The court threw it out today, saying that we were not able to provide evidence that those ballots were late. You know, of course, the affidavit did declare why we believe that. In other states, we're having other circumstances. In Nevada, for example, there's a 30-day residency requirement. And so during COVID, if you were a worker at a casino or some other establishment there, you might have moved out of Clark County into some other place and tried to vote from there or even another state. And so apparently at least 10,000 ballots like that of people who don't currently reside in Clark County have been tabulated or are part of the mix. We are challenging that. That is going to make a material impact in the outcome of that election. Arizona,
can I ask
we are having
specifically
circumstances in some counties like that.
About Pennsylvania, because that looks like there's a lot of legal stuff going on there. What are the challenges being brought, and what's going on in Philadelphia?
Yeah, so Philadelphia is particularly problematic. There's some issues in some of the other blue strongholds. There's 3 lawyers at my law firm who are actually on the ground there in Philadelphia. And what they are witnessing is, first of all, they're not being allowed anywhere near the ballots to be able to observe. I just described to you how it happens in Michigan. That's how it happens all over the country, that you're supposed to have lawyers from both sides witnessing somebody handling or changing or amending a ballot. That's not happening. And so Republicans are more than 30 feet away or even 100 feet away in some circumstances. That's meaningless. And so that's what we're objecting to. So when we're saying stop the count, we don't mean stop the count altogether. We mean stop the count until it can be fairly observed. Listen, we have the United Nations doing observation around the world, and under UN standards, not allowing both sides to witness the ballot counting, that's illegitimate. Yet Those are the standards in some Democrat states, and they're making excuses like, oh, it's COVID or it's too crowded here. To use the Detroit example, they're holding this counting in the same place as they hold the Detroit Auto Show. It's a vast space, and it is not overcrowded.
Harmeet, also wanted to ask you to respond to what Rudy Giuliani said at a press conference yesterday about this very issue. Play the clip.
We're going to win Pennsylvania, but they're trying to cheat us out of it because they know it's their only path to victory. They know it's the only path to victory. And so we came here today, we met with all our lawyers. We are going to file suit in Pennsylvania. This is rampant corruption, and it can't happen. It simply can't happen.
This is among one of the most anti-democratic things I've ever seen or encountered. And it's not just here in Philadelphia. This is going on all over the country.
What does Rudy Giuliani think is going on right now? He's one of the president's lawyers. He's part of this effort as well. We're hearing a lot about what wouldn't just be mistakes in this ballot counting process, honest mistakes, which clearly are happening. I don't think anybody would think that's not the case. But that there's actual intentional fraud that could be going on, that is perhaps going on. How would that be happening, and what is Rudy Giuliani referring to?
Well, he's referring to, first of all, you might accept that there are honest mistakes happening if you believe in the integrity of the people who are in charge. Where you have the election officials in Philadelphia and overall the Secretary of State in Pennsylvania having made years of negative remarks about the president and calling him illegitimate, then you start with a baseline of distrust. Then you have them not allowing Republicans to stand there and observe the count. You have poll workers in Philadelphia wearing Biden-Harris 2020 masks on their faces. There are multiple photographs of that. That is blatantly illegal electioneering, not allowed in any state in the United States. You have things like that. And then you have a illegitimacy of the Secretary of State, who is not under our federal law allowed to change the rules of an election, imposing this 3-day after the election receipt deadline. She also changed a separate law which requires first-time voters to provide evidence of their identification within 6 days of the election. She changed that to 9 days. What does that mean? That effectively gives Democrats 9 days after the election to mess with the ballot count. And I think everybody is beginning to become familiar with what we're familiar with in California, which is this concept of late-breaking dumps of ballots. We had that in California because of ballot harvesting. Now you're going to have it in the rest of the country because, unfortunately, Republicans did not listen to the charge that we are going to have messing with our election results from lawyers who have that in other states like California. And so we have to stop this mail balloting system in the future that allows ballots to continue to be received days or even weeks after the election, because fraud will occur. And I would add to everything you've asked me, there are credible, in my opinion, instances coming up of dead people's ballots having been voted. And that is relatives, grandchildren, or children of those people have gone online after seeing reports and checked the ballot status in Michigan, in Nevada, in Pennsylvania, and in some other states. And they are reporting, I haven't verified this myself, they are reporting dead people's ballots having been voted. And you can check this in many states. So I would urge people, if they're concerned about it, go check and see if your deceased relative's ballot has been voted. That would be fraud.
Yeah, I was going to say, I'm not a constitutional lawyer, but I'm pretty sure that's illegal. Harmeet Dillon, everybody, thank you so much for joining us. Good luck to you, and we'll have you back soon.
Thank you, Buck.
It's been 48 hours since election night, and we still don't know who our next president's going to be. Just how long can this go on for? The short answer? A long time. The longer answer? Well, that's up next in the Buck Brief. With the election up in the air, there's a number of possible paths for both candidates. I know, it's crazy. Of course, the final decision is likely to be made by the Electoral College. That's what we think is going to happen. But if this thing keeps dragging on, it could be decided by the courts or even by Congress. That's going to do wonders for the losing side's faith in democracy, I'm sure. Let's take a look at the possibilities and open up the Buck Brief. Alrighty, so let's go through it, shall we? Ari Fleischer, former White House press secretary, he had this tweet that he put out that should remind everybody of just how insane all this can still get. If Trump wins North Carolina, Pennsylvania, Nevada, and Arizona, but loses Georgia, guess what? The race would be tied 269 to 269. We will return to this in a second because that there is a process for it, and it does not involve, a series of contests of physical strength among combatants or anything like that. There is a process for this. But first, let's look at, assuming that doesn't happen, the tie scenario, because I'll get to that in a moment. You have Biden could win narrowly with Arizona added to what he already has listed here. You see this. If Biden wins Arizona, 270 to 268 would be the final tally there. If Biden wins because he's got Pennsylvania, 279 to 259. By the way, let me just say, in the first one with Arizona, a 2-vote differential on an election like this is just mind-blowing, right? But I've been saying all along it's going to be a very close election. Narrow Biden win with Pennsylvania, 279 to 259. So that's interesting. Narrow Trump win with Arizona, 279 to 258. So if Trump wins Arizona, which as I talk to you now, Arizona still keeps playing this game of, we're not sure when we're going to get you a final count. It's not that big a state. I think there were about 3 million and change votes overall cast there. You'd think they should be able to get this one together in a couple of days, right? If not the day of the election. Since when did we give up on this hope, on this dream that we could find out on election night who won the presidency? Well, with mail-in ballots, thank you Democrats, of course, it's all changed the game in a big way. But there's still the possibility that Trump will get Arizona. From what I last saw, he was on the final stretch of votes being counted. He was getting a higher percentage than he needed if that percentage continued for him to make up the gap, which would also mean that a certain other network would have to retract its very early declaration that Joe Biden won Arizona. And at this point, honestly, an inexplicably early declaration because it's a binary, right? You either win, one side wins or the other side wins. And if you're going to call it that early, you could always be right in the end, but you shouldn't call it unless you know it. And there's no way they know it because we right now could not tell you, no one could tell you with certainty who is going to win Arizona. And then you get the narrow Trump win if he takes Nevada. And I know we've been talking about these lawsuits and the situation there on the ground. Here's the problem that we think, or we're told, is going to come up in Nevada. There were a lot of folks who were out of state, didn't qualify for residency, and may have voted there anyway. So that's not necessarily criminal or anything that's, a problem that way, but it still invalidates the vote. You're still not allowed to do that. I'm sure plenty of people probably didn't know. Although if I had to guess, if we had to have a little conversation about this, who thinks that out of state but non-qualifying because of residency issues votes anywhere in the country where this is a problem, and it's probably an issue in a few states, if I had to guess, I would think that a vast majority of those votes went for Joe Biden. You'd have to wonder, why is that? Why is it? Why don't we ever find a big batch of 50,000 or even 5,000 just random Trump votes somewhere? Reminds me back in the day of the senatorial contest between Norm Coleman and the I'm Good Enough and Smart Enough guy from SNL. Remember him, Al Franken? I think Stuart Smalley was the name of that character. They were finding ballots in the trunks of cars just in time for the recount. Oh, look at that. Look at that. Just happened. And that election came down to a handful of votes. All right. If Biden wins Georgia, there is this possibility, and this is what Ari Fleischer, I said we'd return to this. There is this possibility of a 269 to 269 tie again. Now, you can imagine that the people out there who think that it's appropriate to loot, riot, and burn already, which has been happening in Portland, the National Guard was called in. In New York, there were people that were getting violent, even one woman arrested for spitting in the face of a police officer. It's on video, it's gross. Even those people are not going to handle it very well if we get to a 269 to 269 tie. They're also known as Biden voters. So I think you should be prepared for what the country's like if that goes that way. And then you get to the process, because the founding fathers, as we all know, were much smarter than the people today who are saying, abolish the Electoral College, and abolish the police too, the dumbest thing I've heard maybe all year. The founding fathers were geniuses about governance and how to set up checks and balances, and bequeathed us this incredible republic that we are now trying to sustain, even though there are a lot of people out there who are doing their best to undermine it. Well, what happens if we get to that tie? If we get to that 269 to 269 tie, it goes to the Congress, to the House of Representatives, and then it turns into state-by-state delegation. So it's not about Electoral College anymore. You get to state partisan House control. So who controls the House in that state? And you got 26 that would be Republican at that point, friends. So let me just say this. Already, if Trump wins this thing, I hope he does. I think he can. But if he wins, you know they're not going to accept it. And that's based on just the election going the way it is right now with all the recounts and legal challenges. If it gets tossed to the House, which we know the Democrats complain all the time about gerrymandering, and they whine as if they don't gerrymander too, do you think they're going to accept this president for 1 second? These lunatics convinced themselves for 4 years that Donald Trump stole the election with the help of Vladimir Putin and some Facebook ads. You think if it goes to the House of Representatives, they're going to consider him a legitimate president? So strap in, folks. It's going to be quite a ride for the next few weeks for this country. Hopefully we come out okay on the other side. Coming up, big tech companies like Twitter are working overtime to control information on their platforms. We got more about that with National Review writer David Harsanyi. Stay there. Big tech has never been shy about showing what side of the aisle they stand on. They've basically endorsed Biden for president. In fact, I wish they would so we could just all get the waiting game over with here. But since Election Day, it seems social media companies have become a little too trigger happy with the censor button. If you look at President Trump's Twitter page, it's one message after another that gets censored. Just this morning, these two tweets from the president were flagged. All of the recent Biden claimed states will be legally challenged by us for voter fraud and state election fraud. Plenty of proof. Just check out the media. We will win. America first. And this, any vote that came in after Election Day will not be counted. So now, instead of, quote, fact-checking, big tech doesn't even want you to say your opinion. That's right, they're censoring your point of view. Well, only if you're a conservative, that is. So does this ever end? Can we do anything about it? It's Harsanyi time, everybody. Let's bring in David Harsanyi, senior writer at National Review, to drop the truth bombs for which we know him so well. David, I got to tell you, I'm a pretty well-behaved boy on Twitter. And yet I got a tweet blocked. And all I was saying was, I made a little bit of a joke, but I said, let's look out in the days ahead for the possibility of finding 5,000 more Biden votes in the dumpster over the next 48 hours. They can say what they want about that. There is no basis. That's not a factual statement. There's no basis of fact to challenge that. It's me saying, watch out for this, guys. It could happen. So how do these things, it's not just me, it's the president, which is, in fairness, more important. How is this happening?
I don't know. I also said something about in a tweet, which I thought was completely factual, that postmarked that in Pennsylvania you can vote after the election possibly because there is no postmark on accepted ballots up to I forgot how many days, and they put a little sticker on there. I was suspended last week for the first time for 24 hours because I made a
David Harsanyi got suspended from Twitter. This is amazing, folks. If you didn't know this, this is like sending Mother Teresa out to do hard labor. This should not happen.
Right. I made a joke about how if I really wanted to get banned, I would just tell everyone to go make sure to go out and vote on November 4th. So for that joke, they suspended me and I had to remove that tweet, which typically I would hold strong, but that was just a joke. It wasn't like important information. But anyway, clearly big tech and the people who work for censoring tweets and putting labels on them, which intimates that you're lying about something even when you're not, are on the left. They work for the Biden campaign. And, it's the same people who banned a Post story with verified information that was well within the bounds of normal journalism and good investigative journalism. And, that's what they do. I mean, it's clear that they don't do the same for Biden, who incidentally, his campaign said, we are going to win this race. They basically said the same thing Trump said in that tweet that you just showed. And he didn't have anything affixed to his tweet.
Right. I've heard that the context of when every vote is counted will win the race is somehow changes it. It absolutely does not. I mean, you're just saying that you've won, right? The votes are already all in. So if every vote's counted and you win, you're saying you've won. But I mean, they're playing all kinds of games here. One thing I have to say that bothers me about all this is we've reached the point, because you remember in recent years, you would say there's a bias against conservatives in big tech. The mainstream media, I mean, journalists are 95% Democrat. We all know this. I mean, this is now gospel. It's understood. People might deny it, but they're just being silly. But with big tech, there were people who would say, oh no, it's my favorite was it's the algorithm. The algorithm that never suspends liberals for no reason, but somehow the algorithm just, magically is only suspending or blocking or deplatforming entirely conservatives. I wish I could say, David, that going forward, at least we can have the discussion from that point of view, but I'm expecting gaslighting on this, meaning that in 6 months, whoever's the president, when people like me or you say, well, we all know big tech is biased for the Democrats, right? There'll be a whole chorus out there. No, they're not. What do you think?
Yeah, I don't think any person of good faith can say that that's not the case. The Twitter, I'm not sure about Facebook, but Twitter's communication department is literally one of the people who tells us about the presidential tweets being censored and stuff like that was the press secretary for Kamala Harris. They're filled with left-wing activists. I'm not sure who makes the decisions. One time I wrote this piece and I accidentally said that one of them made decisions, and Twitter called me and sent me all these demands to fix my post, which I did. But I'm not convinced that they're not part of the decision-making process. I mean, who is? They won't let you know. There's no transparency. So I mean, I think that you're right. We know that they're part of the left-wing campaign, and I'm not saying, I don't know what to do about it, but it is a fact.
Well, let's talk about what to do about it for a second. I mean, I think you're right in that nobody has a clear answer yet. I think the Section 230 as big tech bias panacea is a little overstated. I think even if you got rid of it, people need to think about what that would mean and what, it wouldn't just all of a sudden force them all to be unbiased arbiters of truth. So, I mean, do you think that building more platforms is the answer? I mean, conservatives need to take that seriously. I know everyone always says, oh, but that'll take so long, it'll take forever. Well, the Democrats and the left, they get to enjoy the fruits of their labors of taking over academia, Hollywood, making these places political monocultures. And maybe it took them 50 years, or maybe over the past 50 years, they've just solidified it. But we got to start somewhere, don't we?
Yeah, I am not for removing liability protections, even though I don't think these places act like platforms anymore, because I don't think that it's going to be helpful in the long run for free expression and for discussions that people have, even if they're censored. I don't want to empower government anymore to control these things, because even if these guys are left-wingers, the folks who control administrative state apparatus and those people are always going to be on the left, and they're in the end going to make it even worse on conservatives. And so I have an ideological problem with that, and I have a practical problem with that. As far as building our own, the right wingers building their own platforms and stations and things like that, I think that that's necessary. My friend Molly Hemingway pushes back and says, well, it's not, you can say that, but it's incredibly difficult to do and takes a really long time. She's right about that too. But as this election showed, I am not a big fan of democracy and elections. I don't view it as this religious thing like a lot of people do. But I'm always sort of heartened when I have elections like this and I see people say, you know what, we don't care about what you're saying. We don't care that you run the tech, industry and the entire media industry. We don't buy it. And when you see Latinos voting in bigger numbers against socialism, basically, and African Americans and things like that, I feel good about building your own things. I think it takes time, but I think it's going to be okay. I think the media has lost a lot of its credibility. It's lost a lot of its influence. And I don't think that people fall for it anymore. And so let them run CNN for a while. I think you can build other more important kind of, networks like you're a part of now. I think that that's the way to go, and you will win in the end.
I think that any big tech company that sends Harsanyi into the naughty corner really needs to have a log talk with somebody. I don't know.
I'm trying to get suspended. I'm trying to get off that site. It's the worst thing. It makes me a worse person. I feel anxious and stressed all the time.
Twitter destroys them. It's worse than a video game addiction, especially in our business. But that's the reality of it. And it's also funny too because it creates this incentive. It's like hamsters hitting the pedal. The more you tweet, the more followers you get. So people just sit there and they're all comparing themselves to everyone else's tweets all the time. Normal human beings, I'm so thankful that they exist out there who are like, what? They don't even know about it. They don't even care about this stuff. But anyway, David Harsanyi, everybody out at National Review. Read his stuff. Follow him on Twitter. Don't forget about all that stuff I just said. And David, good to see you. Antifa returns, a ballot counter freaks out, and a New York Times columnist is pretty upset with black Trump voters. It's time for a roundup of the left-wing lunacy and terrible takes in a little segment we like to call The Buckshot. Oh yeah, so let's start with it, shall we? This was here in New York City where I'm doing this show. A woman who was in fact arrested for this was part of a series of, are we going to call them protests? Because I think mini riot might be better. Not a huge riot, not like top class left-wing riot, but sort of a little mini riot. She got up in an NYPD officer's face and spat right in his face after calling him a fascist. I think we have that, don't we? Oh yeah.
You fascist! You fascist! You're all
I think you could call that a person who's emotionally unwell, and almost certainly a Biden voter. Notice that there was the spittle, which you would think the officer is giving her a little bit of, he's giving her like, okay, you get that one for free. And then because she was screaming fascist and the F word in his face, she decided to follow it up with a full-on hock one right in the guy's face. And I can tell you, I don't care who you are, what your job is, police, no police. Someone does that to you, you're gonna put hands on them. She ended up in the drunk tank, and I'm sure was released soon thereafter because of New York City's insane bail reform laws, but nonetheless. You also have in Portland, a Biden supporter talking about white supremacists. Play this one. I think it's time to invest in whatever company makes Xanax. This is crazy stuff here. That was in Portland, and here's a guy who, in classic liberal fashion, thinks, I have a Biden sticker on my door. I got a Biden sign. Don't beat me up. It's like, they are autocratic or authoritarian lunatics. They don't care about your Biden stickers. They don't care about your lawn sign. They're drunk with the power of their own idiocy and lunacy, buddy. Welcome to the revolution. It's now outside your house. You don't get to sleep. That's what happens when you let crazy leftists take over your city, as has happened in Portland. An otherwise charming place with quite tasty food and some excellent donuts. And then you got this guy in Georgia who had a little bit of a freak out, a ballot counter. Here we go.
I'm wondering what's going on here. This dude has a fit about something. flips off a ballot and then crumples it up.
Yes, inspiring for the nonpartisan nature of our election ballot counting process, right? To see somebody who's sitting there looking at ballots as they come in, marking down who's being voted for, and giving the middle finger to the ballot. I'm going to guess, I'm just going to go out on a limb here, that he saw something in there he didn't like, and it wasn't that the Green Party has gotten a few more votes. I don't know. I'm just going to say that I'm guessing there were some Trump votes that might have been in there. But don't ask any questions. You're not allowed to question any of this. It's the sanctity of our democracy as long as Joe Biden wins. If Joe Biden loses, our democracy is crap and it's time for revolution. But if Joe Biden wins, it's sacred. Those are your orders. That's the way it is. And then we also have Philly ballot counters ignoring a court order. Oh, this is fun. Play it.
You guys had 8 attorneys, I think it was 8 attorneys enter your appearance on this. I don't understand why 8 attorneys need to evaluate this order. I did it all by myself. It says that no later than 10:30 today, you're to follow the election code, and my people, my clients, representatives, are to be within 6 feet of the process.
We have read the order, and we are complying with the order, and we will discuss it with you in a bit.
The compliance is 6 feet.
What would non-compliance look like compared to this?
No, you don't get to read something and say you're complying when you're not actually doing the thing that it says. What's the problem here with having ballot watchers watch our beautiful, sanctified democracy do what it does? Oh, only if Joe Biden is winning is it a beautiful, sanctified democracy. I just want to make sure we're clear on this. It's sacred, our republic, our institutions, as long as Democrats get what they want. Otherwise, burn it all down, all that stuff. And then you have peaceful protests in New York City. Let's see what those look like. Yes, it looks violent, it looks like chaos and mayhem, but we weren't there. Did someone use the wrong preferred pronoun for someone? Got to pay the consequences, folks. That's it for Hold the Line with Buck Sexton. Up next, the No Spin News with Bill O'Reilly. Shields high.